Hey guys, what's up? My name's Tryston and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to do a bit more of a factual discussion on the Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash debacle that's going on right now. It's a really big conversation going on in the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash community. I did a video kind of explaining my thoughts on Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash in my last video, but it was more so focused around... I didn't really like that video. I think the point I'm trying to make is really good. If you didn't see it, I suggest checking it out. It's going to be in the description. It'll also be in the little card up on the top. Basically, for those of you that didn't watch it, I talked a bit about how Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash is bad for the whole Bitcoin community because the branding is getting screwed up right now, where people that aren't necessarily very educated in the space don't really know what Bitcoin Cash is, and some people might think that Bitcoin Cash is like the new Bitcoin because of some arguments going on. Like, people aren't very sure or comfortable because on r/Bitcoin, which is a subreddit, everyone's like Bitcoin, pro Bitcoin, and r/BTC, which is short for Bitcoin, is everyone's pro Bitcoin Cash, and a lot of people there act like Bitcoin Cash has already taken Bitcoin or 100% will, even though it will not 100%. I'm not saying Bitcoin Cash won't overtake Bitcoin. I'm just saying I don't think there's a huge chance it will, and it's definitely not 100%, let alone my opinions. It's not Bitcoin yet. Even if it is in the future, it doesn't matter. So there's a lot of confusion. People are very scared, you know, and it even scared me for a little while. There was a point in time a couple days ago where I was actually pretty scared after I really took an analysis at when Bitcoin went down to 5,400 at its lowest, and at the same time Bitcoin Cash went all the way up to 2,800, and Bitcoin Cash was basically halfway to overtaking Bitcoin, which is pretty, honestly, like, you know, hats off to that. That's a pretty big accomplishment for them. I may not agree with Bitcoin Cash, but that's a huge accomplishment to get up that high. It was pretty scary. But I want to talk in this video about, I want to actually give some facts and explain to people what Bitcoin Cash is, why it's so big, and why it's so important. The basic idea of Bitcoin Cash is, for a long time, Bitcoin is supposed to be considered the main cryptocurrency for exchanging around the world. That's the goal of it. The goal was a peer-to-peer cash electronic payment system, in Satoshi's vision, in the white paper that he originally proposed back in 2008. And Bitcoin Cash supporters argue that the Bitcoin core team, the people that mainly develop Bitcoin, have abandoned this vision and are instead keeping it completely underdeveloped and haven't scaled it properly, which I agree with. The issue is, if you look at the Bitcoin average transaction, if we zoom out of all time, for pretty much ever, average transaction for fee for a Bitcoin transaction was about $0.01. That's not that bad. It could be less, but that's not bad. That's totally not bad. But then it started slowly getting up until, of course, in 2017, right after SegWit. Well, not right after SegWit, but this is around the time when SegWit was proposed, which we'll get into that in a minute. The price of transaction fees started going up. And then 2017, it skyrocketed. I mean, the average transaction fee now in 2017 for a Bitcoin transaction is about $7. Generally, it hovers around $7 right here, as you can see. Sometimes it skyrockets to $19. The reason why it's not consistent is because it's not a fixed fee. The way that the fees function on Bitcoin, I don't know 100% of this is for all currencies, but at least with Bitcoin, the way that it functions is there's a 1 megabyte storage limit on each block that contains transactions. So only 1 megabyte of worth of transactions can be stored in a single block. The problem with that is that's a very low amount. Transactions don't take up that much space. I believe it's like 4 kilobytes per transaction. I'm not exactly sure if that's with or without SegWit. I have no idea. But the transactions don't take up that much room. They're just like one, you know, string of... There's just like a few strings of characters and numbers to form a transaction. So the issue is, when a block is full, new transactions trying to get into a block, instead of... The analogy I give is, when a transaction's trying to get into a block, imagine my room is a block, and I'm trying to get people in here. There's a bunch of people coming in, and it gets full. The solution that the fees pretty much try to propose is, instead of making the room bigger or making another room, let's just charge more money to get into the room, so therefore the fee is higher. That's kind of the basic idea of it, is the block is a fixed amount of room, it's a fixed room, And so instead of, expanding or making a new room like a new block, you have to instead charge higher fees per block. So this has been getting really out of hand recently. Originally, SegWit was proposed, which is segregated witness. The idea was, instead of basically making the block size bigger, let's make the transactions a little bit smaller by removing the signature of the person sending a transaction from the algorithm that creates a transaction ID. That was the basic idea of it, and it was processed as a soft fork, meaning it was an optional update to the Bitcoin blockchain. Optional update that some exchanges and some wallets do have and don't. It came out in about October of 2016, I believe, about a year ago. And that was supposed to kind of fix this. It didn't really fix it that much, as you can see here. I believe SegWit came around somewhere around over here in October, I believe. I'm not exactly sure on that. I don't know if you could actually tell when SegWit was actually put out and if it actually made a difference. But obviously nowadays, it doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't even seem like anything happened. It just seemed like it was fluctuating, as it tends to do with graphs. And you look down here, and here's Bitcoin Cash. So this blue line is Bitcoin. I should have said that. And this red line is Bitcoin Cash. These are the average fees for transactions. And Bitcoin Cash isn't perfect, but it's definitely good. Compared to something like Litecoin or especially Dogecoin. Dogecoin average transaction fee. Take this with a grain of salt, because that might mean that there's just not a lot of people using Dogecoin. I don't know too much about Dogecoin and Litecoin and how they scale. But average transaction fee for Litecoin is about 8 cents. Average transaction fee for Dogecoin is about 6. It's like 0.001 cents. It's literally a tenth of a cent, generally speaking. So I personally like Dogecoin, but I don't know too much about it. And so you look at that, and you're like, wow, look at this graph. Even though Bitcoin Cash isn't perfect, it's light years ahead of Bitcoin. So why is that? Well, the main reason is because Bitcoin Cash is one of the solutions to it. By the way, it's a hard fork from Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash's solution is, instead of having a 1 megabyte block, let's have an 8 megabyte block. So that means we could have 8 megabytes worth of transactions. That's a lot more. And not only that, but blocks, I have observed, tend to occur a lot quicker. So if we look at, here are the blocks that are being mined on the Bitcoin blockchain. This is the Bitcoin blockchain. You can see here, so it's 2:13, then 7 minutes later, another one, then 21 minutes later, another one, another 16 minutes, then about 10 minutes, then almost a half hour later. It's generally goes back and forth, and it's around 10 minutes per block. And as you can see, and that may not be that long, like 10 minutes for a transaction to get into a block and be confirmed. That's not too bad. But the issue is, sometimes, like I said, blocks are getting very full. Almost every block is full to 1 million kilobytes, which is 1 megabyte. And that's the limit, the fixed limit on the Bitcoin block size. So when new transactions come in, let's say that this is the most recent blockchain, I couldn't get in here because it's absolutely full to the brim of transactions. So I got to wait for the next block to come in. And there might still be a ton of people like in line ahead of me. So I might have to pay a higher fee to get in that block, which is where the fees come in. Where you look is here, it's like, transactions come in like 2:05, then a half hour later there, a half hour later there, and that's about 20 minutes, then 20 minutes. The average transaction time here, I believe, is about 20 minutes. So it's actually longer, but if you look here in kilobytes, it's a lot smaller. I believe this is, I don't know if this 54.7 or 54,000. I wonder what that is, actually. I can't tell. It looks like a point, so I'm just going to assume that it's only like 105 kilobytes per here. And the maximum size for a block is 8 million kilobytes. 8 million kilobytes. Or excuse me, 8 million bytes, I believe. 8 million bytes. Sorry about that. It's 8 million bytes, not kilobytes. 8 million bytes. So these aren't even close to being full. Even if this is like 54,000, that's still not close to 8 million kilobytes. So that's really important to understand. That's the main idea, is that even though blocks are slower, they seem to be slower, because if we look here, blocks are much like longer they take a lot longer to get processed. Like sometimes they take about, an hour and a half. That is very true for Bitcoin, though. This chart isn't actually 100% accurate. This is saying that about every block takes about 10 minutes to confirm. Well, that's pretty accurate. But like I said, sometimes it fluctuates, and sometimes transactions have to wait. So this isn't also very accurate. You may look at this and say, wow, this Bitcoin Cash takes a long time to confirm transactions. And it's like, yes, but you also got to understand that the block size is a lot smaller or a lot larger, so the blocks must be up for a longer time. That's just speculation. I don't know exactly how it works. That's my view on it, because I don't think that there's any real reason for this graph to be so high up. That is very weird. And then also another thing about Bitcoin Cash, a lot of miners are very enticed by it. So if you don't know, when you're mining, or when you're, decrypting transactions, as so it's called, there is something called a difficulty rate, where basically it's a certain difficulty level for you to find a block as a miner and publish transactions into that block and publish it to the blockchain. There's a certain difficulty to finding that. Basically, how hard your computer hardware must work to get that block. And with Bitcoin, it's just skyrocketed. I mean, it's insanely, the difficulty rate is insane. I don't know what these numbers mean, I'll be honest, but the difficulty rate for mining is insane. So it's not very profitable unless you're a huge organization. And that's one of the issues, is that it's very difficult to make profit while mining when using the Bitcoin blockchain, when you're mining on Bitcoin. And so it's slowly kind of moving away from a decentralized blockchain to kind of a more in the middle of centralized. It's not centralized. It's not centralized. It isn't. And it won't ever be centralized. But the issue is that it's slowly moving into this kind of place where only really rich companies that have server farms can really do this. Which in my original What is Bitcoin video is the whole point. Not necessarily the whole point, it's one of the points why Bitcoin was invented. So that way anyone, you or me, could theoretically run the program on our computer. And we could, but unless you have a really beast rig, and even then, if you do, you're only going to make like maybe 10, 20 bucks a day. Because finding a block is extremely difficult. You might make some money on confirming transactions, but you won't make any money from confirming a block. That's extremely rare. Meanwhile, the difficulty rate is so much lower on Bitcoin Cash. And if we go to CoinMarketCap, the price for Bitcoin Cash is pretty high. It's the second highest of any coin, I believe, right now. Bitcoin Cash is about, average. It's been hovering around 1,100, 1,200 to 1,600 now. It's having another pump right now. It looks like the pump's kind of dying down, but at least it was having another pump. So the price is pretty consistent at 1,100, 1,200 right now. That's a pretty good price with such a low mining difficulty. That's good. Let's check out some other competitors with it. Wow, the Litecoin difficulty is extremely low. That's interesting. I wonder if that's actually supposed to be like that, or... Yeah. I don't know what those numbers mean, but I'm just saying. That's an observant thing. That also might be because less people use Litecoin to pay for things rather than Bitcoin Cash. So take that with a grain of salt. Like I said, all this stuff, take it with a grain of salt. I'm just expressing the basic things that I know in a video. What's this? Bitcoin Cash time. We already talked about that. But yeah, I think that's basically all I wanted to touch on. Was basically I wanted to give people the idea of like Bitcoin Cash has a place. I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of months, if it's going to stay or it's going to completely replace Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Cash will become Bitcoin, and Bitcoin become Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Legacy. Kind of like how we have here, where this is the original Ethereum, but then Ethereum, I'm guessing, had a hard fork, and then this eventually became the real Ethereum, and now that one's replaced. And it's still doing okay. I mean, it's hovering around a decent price, and it's still in the top 10 coins, but it's not nearly near as Ethereum, which Ethereum has hit its all-time highs, which is absolutely awesome. I'm really excited for Ethereum. I haven't had a chance to look into the technology yet, and I don't really invest in things unless I know the technology behind it. But yeah, that's basically it. I just wanted to touch on it. I wanted to, show people why Bitcoin Cash is important, and don't just ignore it. Acknowledge it's there, acknowledge the reason it's there, and acknowledge the fact that it is important. Don't just dismiss it because you believe in Bitcoin, you want Bitcoin to succeed because of your emotions that you've invested in it and the money you've invested in it. I want Bitcoin to succeed. I want it to be, to grow in price. But at the same time, I recognize that it's really not a good form of transaction. It's really not a good form of online currency compared to all the competitors. And Bitcoin Cash is definitely showing to be a worthy competitor. That's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Feel free to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed. When it comes to the comments, leave some thoughts in the comment section below with what you thought you would like from this video, or if you agreed or disagreed with anything. Where you think the market will be in the next 2 years. Do you think Bitcoin Cash might overtake Bitcoin? Anyways, that's it for me. See you guys. Bye.